Sam lived in a quiet neighborhood where every house looked almost the same. The lawns were trimmed short, the mailboxes stood in neat rows, and the fences were painted white. It was the kind of place where every change was noticed. Sam had lived there for 10 years, and he was used to the curious eyes of neighbors who always seemed to be watching. In his backyard stood an above-ground pool. When he first set it up, his children were small, and summers were filled with splashes, laughter, and the smell of grilled food. Neighbors used to hear the giggles of his kids playing in the cool water. But now his children were grown, busy with their own lives. The pool had been silent for years. Leaves collected on the cover, the water turned cloudy, and even the frame began to rust in places. To Sam, it no longer brought joy. It had become a burden, something that took up space but gave nothing back. One warm Saturday morning, Sam woke early. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft orange. Birds sang from the trees as he stepped outside with a toolbox in one hand and a pair of gloves in the other. He looked at the pool and took a deep breath. Today, he thought, was the day it would come down. He set to work, first draining the water that had been sitting inside. The old pump groaned as it pulled the water out, spilling it into the side yard where it ran like a small stream toward the street drain. The sound of rushing water echoed through the quiet morning. Sam stood with his arms crossed, watching as the level dropped lower and lower. It reminded him of old memories, like the time his youngest daughter had learned to swim right there, or the summer nights when his family floated on inflatable rafts, gazing at the stars. A small smile crossed his face, but it faded quickly. Times had changed, and holding on to the pool no longer made sense. As the water level dropped, Sam fetched his tools and began unscrewing the panels that made up the pool walls. The metal was old but still strong. With patience, he loosened each bolt and stacked the pieces neatly to one side. He was careful not to leave anything lying around, because he liked order and hated the idea of cluttering his yard. By mid-morning, he had removed several sections, and the once round pool now looked broken and hollow. From the street, someone else had been watching. Clara, his neighbor across the way, stood on her porch with a cup of tea in her hand. Clara was known for her sharp eyes and even sharper words. She was the kind of neighbor who measured the height of grass, counted the number of cars parked overnight, and checked if garbage bins were brought in on time. To many, she was the voice of the homeowners association, even if she did not hold an official title. People called her strict, others called her bossy, but one thing was certain, she noticed everything. When she saw Sam working on his pool, her face tightened. She muttered to herself and put down her cup. She pulled out her phone and snapped a picture. In her mind, this was not just a man working in his backyard. To her, this was a violation, a change that might affect the look of the neighborhood. She did not like change, and she did not like not being consulted. Meanwhile, Sam kept working, unaware of her watchful eyes. He paused to drink water and wipe sweat from his forehead. The sun was higher now, and the sound of a lawnmower buzzed faintly in the distance. He looked at the pile of panels he had already stacked. The yard looked bigger without the pool, and he could already imagine planting a garden or setting up a small patio where the family could sit in the evenings. By noon, Clara could no longer keep her thoughts to herself. She walked across the street, her sandals slapping against the pavement. She reached Sam's fence and called out in her sharp voice. "Sam, what are you doing back there?" Sam turned and saw her standing there with her hands on her hips. "Morning, Clara," he said in a calm tone. "I'm taking down the pool. It's old, and I don't need it anymore." Clara frowned deeply. You cannot just remove it like that. The pool was part of your approved design when you moved in. The Homeowners Association does not allow sudden changes without permission. Sam set down his tool and walked closer, keeping his voice steady. It's my pool, my yard. The pool has been unused for years. I checked the rules, and nothing says I must keep it standing. Clara shook her head, clearly displeased. You should have asked first. You should have filled out a request. You cannot simply do whatever you like. Sam felt his patience tested, but he refused to argue. Clara, I appreciate your concern, but this is not your decision. I'm only cleaning up my space. Clara glared at him, her face red with frustration. Without another word, she spun around and marched back across the street. Sam sighed, shook his head, and went back to work. Inside her house, Clara wasted no time. She opened her laptop and began writing an email to the Homeowners Association. Her fingers flew across the keys as she explained what she saw, framing it as a serious problem that required attention. She sent one email, then another. Still not satisfied, she picked up her phone and made a call to a friend on the board. By the time the afternoon sun was high, Clara had made sure that Sam's actions would not go unnoticed. Sam, however, felt at peace. With the pool half gone, the yard already looked brighter and more open. He imagined the fresh space he would have once the last pieces were gone. He did not know that his simple Saturday project was about to stir the entire neighborhood. The afternoon sun was strong, and the sound of cicadas buzzed from the trees. Sam was busy stacking the last heavy panels of the pool when he heard footsteps approaching again. He turned and saw Clara standing by the fence once more, her arms crossed tightly. Her sharp eyes scanned his yard as if she were searching for proof of wrongdoing. Sam, I have spoken with the Homeowners Association, she said firmly. They agree that you should not have taken down the pool without permission. You will be hearing from them soon. Sam wiped sweat from his forehead and set down his wrench. Clara, I already told you. I checked the rules myself. Nothing says I must keep an unused pool. If the association wants to talk to me, I'll show them the guidelines. Clara narrowed her eyes. You think you know better than the association. You think you can do whatever you please just because it is your yard. Sam stayed calm, though he felt irritation rising inside him. He had dealt with Clara's interference before. She once complained about his son's car parked slightly past the driveway, and another time she scolded his daughter for leaving a bicycle leaning against the fence. Sam knew that Clara loved rules more than neighbors. I am not breaking any law, Sam said evenly. I am only cleaning up something that no longer has purpose. It is not hurting anyone. Clara gave a sharp laugh. Not hurting anyone? It hurts the value of the neighborhood. It makes us look careless. If one person can tear down parts of their yard without approval, then anyone can. Soon, this place will not be the same. Sam turned back to his work, signaling that the conversation was over. Clara, I am busy. If the association wants to contact me, they can. But I am not stopping my work today. Clara stood there for a moment, her face red with frustration. She opened her mouth as if to speak again but then snapped it shut. With a quick spin, she walked back toward her house. As soon as she entered, she sat at her desk and typed another long message to the Homeowners Association. This time, her words were more dramatic. She wrote that Sam was destroying property, that his actions could cause flooding, that the neighborhood's beauty was at risk. She added lines about him being rude and uncooperative. Each sentence was heavier than the truth, but Clara did not care. She believed that if she made the problem sound serious enough, the board would act quickly. Still not satisfied, Clara reached for her phone once more. She scrolled to a number she had saved and pressed call. A familiar voice answered. "Hello, this is Officer Brown," said the man on the other end. "Officer, this is Clara from Maple Street," she said quickly. "I need to report something unusual. My neighbor is tearing down a large pool in his backyard. It looks unsafe, and I think it might be against our housing rules. Could you please send someone to check? I am worried about the safety of the neighborhood." The officer paused before answering. "Ma'am, is there any danger to you right now? Any threat?" Clara shook her head, though he could not see it. "Not directly, but it is a big structure, and it is being taken apart without supervision. Please, this could be dangerous." "All right," the officer said politely. "We will send someone to look into it." Clara thanked him and ended the call, a small smile creeping across her face. She felt that victory was near. Soon the police would arrive, and Sam would learn that rules were not to be ignored. Meanwhile, Sam worked quietly, unaware of Clara's efforts. He hummed to himself while unscrewing the last section of the frame. He had placed all the panels neatly against the shed, and the open yard gave him a sense of relief. For the first time in years, he could see the grass stretch wide and clear without the shadow of the pool. He imagined planting flowers along the fence and perhaps adding a bench where he could read in the evenings. The hours passed, and the air grew cooler as the sun began its slow descent. Birds fluttered across the yard, and a soft breeze carried the scent of cut grass from a neighbor's lawn. Sam paused to drink water and looked around with satisfaction. To him, the project was nearly done. But while he felt peace, Clara was pacing inside her house like a soldier preparing for battle. She checked the window every few minutes, waiting for the moment when the police would arrive. Her phone buzzed with a reply from one of the HOA board members, telling her that they would review the matter in their next meeting. That was not enough for Clara. She wanted action now. She wanted Sam to feel the weight of rules immediately, not later. Finally, as evening shadows stretched across the street, the sound of engines reached her ears. She rushed to the window and smiled widely. 2 police cars turned the corner and parked near Sam's house. Their lights were not flashing, but their presence was enough to draw attention. Curtains moved as neighbors peeked out, curious about what was happening. Clara hurried out of her front door, waving at the officers as they stepped out of their cars. "This way," she called, pointing toward Sam's yard. She walked quickly ahead of them, eager to show them the so-called violation. Sam, who was picking up the last bolts from the grass, looked up in surprise as he saw the officers approaching with Clara leading the way. He placed the bolts carefully into a small container and straightened his back. The sudden arrival of the police caught him off guard, but he felt no fear. He had done nothing wrong. Clara spoke first, her voice loud and full of authority. "Here he is. This is the man I told you about. He is destroying property in violation of the association's rules." The officers looked at Sam, then at the neatly stacked panels by the shed. They noticed the clean yard, the absence of noise or damage, and the calm man standing before them. One of the officers stepped forward and spoke gently. "Good evening, sir. We received a report about some activity here. Is everything all right?" Sam nodded calmly. "Yes, everything is fine. This is my pool. It has been unused for years, and I decided to take it down. I checked the guidelines, and I am not breaking any law. The officer studied his face, then glanced at Clara, who was already preparing to argue again. The other officer walked around the yard, checking the panels, the grass, and the space where the pool once stood. Everything looked safe and orderly. The neighborhood grew silent as more people peeked through their blinds, waiting to see what would happen next. The warm evening breeze moved gently through the trees as the two officers stood in Sam's backyard. One officer, tall and calm, kept his hands on his belt while the other walked slowly around, observing every detail. The panels of the pool were stacked neatly against the shed, and the ground where the pool once stood looked tidy, as if Sam had planned everything carefully. Clara stood close to the officers, pointing at the open space. "You see," she said loudly, "this is not right. He is tearing down a structure that was approved by the homeowners association. He is acting without permission, and it could hurt all of us. He is breaking the rules of the neighborhood." Sam stood quietly, his hands resting at his sides. He did not want to argue, but he also did not want to appear weak. After a moment, the taller officer looked at him. "Sir, can you explain what you are doing here today?" Sam nodded. "Yes, of course. This was my pool. It has not been used for many years. The water was dirty, and the frame was getting old. My children are grown, and I do not need it anymore. I am removing it carefully, keeping everything clean, and planning to reuse the space for a garden. I am not breaking any law." The officer listened carefully. He studied Sam's calm face, then looked back at the pool parts stacked in order. "Everything here looks safe," he said after a pause. "We do not see any danger or any problem for the public." Clara quickly stepped forward. "But what about the rules? What about the homeowners association? He cannot simply do what he wants. This neighborhood has standards." The other officer, who had been walking around, returned to stand beside his partner. He spoke in a steady voice. "Ma'am, we are police officers. Our duty is to check if there is any law being broken, or if anyone is in danger. From what we see, this man is only cleaning his yard. We do not deal with association guidelines." Clara's mouth fell open in disbelief. She turned to the officers with frustration. "So you are telling me you will do nothing? You will just let him change the property without permission?" The officer shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, unless he is committing a crime, we cannot interfere. This is his home, his property, and he has the right to make changes as long as it does not harm others." Sam remained quiet, but inside, he felt a small wave of relief. The officers were fair, and they understood the difference between laws and neighborhood rules. Still, he did not want to disrespect Clara in front of them, even though she had brought them here without cause. "Thank you for coming," Sam said politely. "I understand you have work to do, and I appreciate that you checked. As you can see, there is no trouble here." The officers gave him a nod. One of them even smiled slightly, as if he admired Sam's calm response. But Clara was not ready to give up. She raised her voice, making sure the neighbors who had gathered near their windows could hear. "This is not over, Sam. You think you can stand against the rules, but the association will deal with this. You cannot ignore the standards we all agreed to when we moved here." Sam sighed softly. He kept his tone even. "Clara, I am not ignoring anything. I read the rules before I started. There is nothing written that forces me to keep an unused pool. I want my yard clean, and I want to use it in a better way. That is all. At that moment, a few neighbors stepped outside, pretending to check their mailboxes or water their lawns, but their eyes were on Sam's yard. They had seen the police cars arrive, and curiosity had pulled them closer. Some looked annoyed with Clara, while others simply waited to see how the matter would end. The taller officer turned to Clara once more. "Ma'am, our work here is done. There is no violation of law. If you have further concerns, you can take them to the Homeowners Association directly. But as police, we cannot take action against a man working safely on his own property." With that, the officers tipped their caps politely and began walking back to their cars. Their voices carried calm authority, leaving no space for argument. Clara followed a few steps, still speaking in an urgent tone, but they did not turn back. Sam watched as the cars started and slowly drove away. The flashing lights were never turned on, but their brief presence had left a strong mark on the neighborhood. He felt a mix of relief and sadness. He had only wanted to remove an old pool, but it had turned into a scene for the whole street to watch. Clara stood on the sidewalk now, her arms stiff at her sides, her face red with anger. She looked around, noticing the eyes of the neighbors on her. Some whispered to each other, and one man across the street shook his head, clearly tired of her behavior. Clara's mouth pressed into a tight line. Without a word, she turned and marched back into her house, slamming the door behind her. Sam picked up the last few tools from the grass and placed them back into his toolbox. The evening sky turned shades of pink and gold, and for the first time all day, he felt calm again. The space where the pool had stood was wide and open, filled with possibilities. One neighbor, a kind woman named Maria, walked over slowly. She leaned on the fence and gave Sam a gentle smile. "You handled that very well," she said softly. "Clara has been making trouble for a long time. Many of us are tired of her complaints." Sam smiled back. "I only did what I had to. I want peace in my yard. I do not want arguments with anyone." Maria nodded. "Still, it was good to see you stay calm. The whole street was watching. People will remember that." As she walked back to her home, Sam looked once more at his yard. The trouble with Clara was not over, he knew. She would continue to push the Homeowners Association. But the police had left without finding fault, and that gave him confidence. He believed that truth was on his side. The sun dipped lower, and the crickets began to sing. Sam closed his toolbox, carried it to the shed, and stood in the middle of his open yard. Despite the storm Clara had tried to create, he felt something clear and strong in his heart. He had stood his ground with calm and patience, and that gave him quiet strength for whatever was to come. The next morning was bright, with the sun shining warmly across Maple Street. Sam woke early, as he always did, and stepped outside with a cup of tea in his hand. The air smelled fresh, and birds sang cheerfully from the tall trees along the fences. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. But Sam knew the quiet would not last long. The memory of the police visit from the evening before was still fresh in his mind. He had stayed calm, and the officers had left satisfied that nothing illegal had been done. Yet he also knew Clara well enough to understand that she would not let the matter rest. She believed she was the guardian of the neighborhood rules, and she enjoyed that role too much to give it up. Sure enough, by mid-morning, Sam saw Clara walking across the street again. She carried a folder in her hands, thick with papers. Her steps were quick, and her face looked serious. When she reached his fence, she called out in her usual sharp tone, "Sam, I have here the full list of the Homeowners Association rules. You may think you are clever, but I will prove that you have broken them. Sam set down his cup and walked closer, keeping his voice steady. Clara, I already read the rules myself before I started. There is nothing in there that says I must keep an old pool standing. Clara flipped open her folder and pulled out a printed page. Here, she said, tapping the paper with her finger, Section 12, Line 5. It says no major change may be made to the outside structure of any property without prior approval from the association. Sam leaned against the fence, calm as ever. That section speaks about additions like sheds, garages, or new buildings. Removing something old is not the same as building something new. There is nothing here about taking down a pool. Clara's eyes flashed with annoyance. She waved the paper at him as if force could change the meaning of the words. You are twisting it to suit yourself. The spirit of the rule is clear. You are supposed to ask first. Sam shook his head slowly. I respect the rules, Clara, but I also respect fairness. If the rule does not forbid what I have done, then I am not guilty of anything. At that moment, several neighbors had stepped outside again. They pretended to water their plants or sweep their driveways, but their eyes stayed fixed on the conversation. The event of the previous evening had spread quickly, and everyone was curious to see how the dispute would continue. One neighbor, an older man named Tom, called out from his yard. Clara, I have lived here for 15 years, and I remember when the rules were written. They were meant to stop people from building strange new things, not to trap someone with old junk in their yard. Sam is right. There is nothing against removing a pool. Clara turned toward him, her face red. You do not understand, Tom. If we allow this, then anyone can do whatever they want. Another neighbor, Maria, stepped forward with a broom in her hand. Clara, with respect, Sam is not hurting anyone. He is making his yard cleaner. I think that is better for the neighborhood, not worse. Clara's mouth opened and closed as she looked from one neighbor to the next. She had expected them to stand with her, but instead, their voices supported Sam. For years, she had controlled the street with her constant watchfulness, but now the people she had scolded and corrected were speaking up against her. Sam did not gloat. He kept his voice calm, speaking for all to hear. I am not here to fight. I want peace in my home and peace in this neighborhood. But I will not be forced to keep something that no longer serves a purpose. I read the rules, and I followed them. If the association wants to meet with me, I am ready to explain everything. The truth was plain. Clara's argument was weak, and everyone could see it. The police had already checked and found nothing wrong. Now the neighbors themselves were confirming that the rules were not as strict as Clara claimed. Clara's hands shook as she held her folder. She tried one more time, her voice rising. This is not about the pool alone. This is about order. Without rules, everything falls apart. You are setting a bad example. Tom answered firmly from across the street. No, Clara. The bad example is trying to control people beyond what the rules allow. We agreed to fair rules, not endless commands. If the association wishes to tighten the rules in the future, that will be a group decision. But today, Sam has done nothing wrong. The small crowd of neighbors nodded in agreement. Some even clapped lightly, showing support. Clara looked around and realized that she was standing alone. For the first time, her authority seemed to crumble. Her face turned pale, and her voice softened. You will regret this, she muttered, though it lacked the power it once carried. She closed her folder quickly and walked back across the street, her steps slower than before. Sam let out a deep breath. He did not enjoy making an enemy out of Clara, but he could not let her rule his life. He turned to his neighbors and gave them a small smile. "Thank you for speaking the truth. I only want to use my yard in a better way." Maria stepped closer. "Do not worry, Sam. Most of us know what Clara is like. She has made life difficult for everyone at some point. What happened today shows that she cannot always get her way." Sam nodded. "Still, I will be ready if the association calls me. I want everything clear and honest." As the neighbors slowly returned to their homes, Sam looked once more at the open yard. The pool was gone, the panels stacked, and the ground bare but full of promise. He imagined planting flowers, maybe even building a small patio with chairs and a table where his family could gather. The space felt like a blank page ready for a new chapter. Inside her house, Clara sat at her desk again, staring at the folder. She was angry, but also unsettled. For years, her word had been enough to make people nervous. But today, the truth had been spoken openly, and it had turned the neighbors against her. She felt something she had not felt in a long time: doubt. Meanwhile, Sam sat quietly on his porch, watching the sun move higher in the sky. He knew the conflict was not fully finished. The association might still contact him, and Clara might still try to stir more trouble. But the truth had been revealed in front of everyone, and that truth was on his side. That gave him strength. The evening after Clara's failed attempt to prove her case, Maple Street felt different. The tension that had hung over the neighborhood for weeks seemed lighter. Families sat on their porches, children rode their bikes along the sidewalks, and conversations flowed more freely than before. Clara's voice, once the loudest on the street, was absent. Her blinds were drawn, and her yard was unusually quiet. Sam sat on his porch with a cool drink in his hand. He felt tired from the long days of work and the constant stress of dealing with Clara's complaints. Yet there was also a sense of peace growing inside him. His yard looked wide and open, the stack of pool panels neatly stored near the shed. The space was no longer a burden but a new beginning. As he sat, Tom from across the street walked over with slow but steady steps. He carried a small tray with 2 cups of coffee. "Evening, Sam," Tom said warmly. "Mind if I sit with you a while?" "Of course, Tom," Sam replied with a smile. He moved a chair closer. The two men sat together, sipping their drinks and watching the sun sink lower in the sky. Tom leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You handled yourself well, Sam. I saw the way you stayed calm with the police, and again this morning with Clara. Not everyone could do that." Sam shook his head. "It was not easy. I did not want trouble. I only wanted to clean my yard. But when Clara kept pushing, I knew I had to stand firm. If I had given in, it would have never ended." Tom nodded slowly. "That is true. She has been controlling people for too long. Most of us just kept quiet to avoid the fight. But you showed us that it is possible to say no without losing your peace." As they spoke, Maria came over with a small basket of cookies. Her smile was kind, and her eyes showed gratitude. "I wanted to thank you, Sam," she said. "Clara has given me trouble many times. She once told me my flowers were the wrong color for the neighborhood. Imagine that. I never dared to stand up to her, but you did. You gave many of us courage." Sam accepted the basket and smiled warmly. "Thank you, Maria. I did not do it to fight her. I did it because it was the right thing to do. But I am glad if it helped others. The three of them sat together, sharing cookies and stories. Soon, more neighbors joined, bringing small plates of food, and before long, Sam's porch became a place of gathering. People laughed, children played nearby, and for the first time in many years, the neighborhood felt united rather than divided by fear of complaints. Inside her house, Clara peered through her blinds. She saw the group of neighbors sitting on Sam's porch, sharing food and laughter. For years, she had believed that controlling them made her powerful. Now she realized she had only pushed them away. The more she had tried to rule, the more they had resented her. The sight of their joy without her cut deeply, but she could not bring herself to step outside. The next day, Sam began planning the future of his yard. He measured the open space and sketched a simple design on paper. He wanted to plant a small garden in one corner, filled with bright flowers that would bloom in every season. Near the center, he imagined placing a round table with chairs, where his family could gather for meals or quiet talks. He even thought about adding a swing under the tree for his grandchildren to enjoy someday. As he worked, neighbors passed by, offering kind words and encouragement. "Looks great, Sam," one called. "Can't wait to see how it turns out." Another said, "You're making this place better for all of us." Each word of support lifted his spirits and reminded him that he had earned something more valuable than a cleared yard. He had earned respect. Later in the week, the Homeowners Association finally sent a letter. Sam opened it carefully, half expecting more trouble. But to his surprise, the message was short and polite. It said that after reviewing the rules and considering the matter, the association found no violation. They reminded him to keep his yard clean, which he was already doing, and closed the issue. Sam let out a deep breath of relief. The matter was over, at least officially. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, feeling satisfied that the truth had been recognized not only by his neighbors but also by the association itself. When Clara received her copy of the letter, she felt the sting of defeat. Her complaints had led nowhere. The police had dismissed her claims, the neighbors had stood against her, and now the association had ruled in Sam's favor. For the first time, she realized that her influence over Maple Street was slipping away. Sam, however, did not celebrate loudly. He continued with his quiet work, planting flowers, placing stones for a small path, and building his vision for the yard. Each day, he felt lighter, as if removing the pool had also removed a weight from his heart. One evening, as he watered the new plants, Maria stopped by again. She looked at the growing garden and smiled. "You see, Sam, sometimes one small act can change more than we expect. By standing your ground, you didn't only free your yard. You freed all of us from living in constant fear of Clara's complaints." Sam looked around at the street. Children played freely, laughter carried through the air, and neighbors greeted each other with warmth. He nodded slowly. "I suppose so. I only wanted peace, but maybe peace spreads when people see it." That night, Sam sat once more on his porch as the stars filled the sky. The open yard stretched before him, ready for new memories. He thought about the journey he had just faced, about Clara's anger, the police visit, the arguments, and the support of his neighbors. In the end, it was not the removal of the pool that mattered most, but the lesson that came with it. He had learned that standing calmly for what is right could change not only one person's life but the spirit of a whole community. He had learned that respect is not demanded but earned, and it comes from honesty and patience. As the night grew quiet, Sam leaned back in his chair and felt a deep sense of gratitude. The pool was gone, but in its place, something far greater had been built: trust, unity, and respect among neighbors. And that, he thought, was worth more than anything else.